Okay, let's talk about conflict and fighting. Okay,
That's fun.
it is. But you think a lot of it has to do with fear.
Yeah, let's back up. Conflict is inevitable, all right? And we know by research that it's not like healthy marriages have less conflict, right? That healthy marriages might even have more conflict, but they know how to deal with it
right.
in a positive way. So conflict is inevitable. Misery is optional. And so when I talk about fear, what I'm talking about is that I think most of the time when Kathy and I get into some argument, it has triggered a fear that I have. And I think a lot of us have all different types of fear. My fear is I'm not going to be good enough. I could go way back into the psychosis of where that comes from and being raised in a wonderful family. But if I came home with an A, it's a little bit harder, could have been an A+. And, if I had went 3 for 4 at a game, if I was a little faster, I could have stretched that double into a triple. Like there was just always something that
Actually
could
went
be.
to a couple of your games. I don't think you ever went 3 for 4.
That's true. That was all an exaggeration. But so when I think about like my script, anytime I feel broken, it goes back to I'm not good enough. That's a fear. Other people's fears are fear of rejection, fear of failure, fear of being lonely, fear of being unimportant or disliked or powerless or unwanted. So a lot of conflict isn't really, that's surface, like whatever we're going to argue about, it triggers that fear. And then when I have a fear that I'm feeling unwanted or I'm not good enough husband, then I might respond in such a way that actually chases Kathy's fear. And Kathy's fear is being unwanted. So, I mean, you talk about like my fear is I'm not good enough. And so I'm not a good enough husband. Then sometimes I go silent, which then triggers her fear of being unwanted. And our fears just kind of chase each other. So I think it's important to understand that in conflict, to take a step back and say, okay, what is this fear that might be unearthed in me? And is it a common fear? And then I can just say like, babe, that I struggle with, that I'm not good enough. This is pushing that button. And there's a wounding there. And then when Kathy becomes empathetic to that wounding, she says, oh, babe, it has nothing to do with me feeling like you're not a good enough husband. I was just disappointed or whatever. We can talk about it once we know what that primary fear is.
That's good. And, conflict is neither good nor bad. It's going to be there. So if you can work on your conflict, it actually draws you closer together is what I hear you saying.
Yeah, absolutely.
No, that is so key. My if we move it to love languages, my love language is affirmation. So when Kathy's critical to me, and you got to be in a marriage sometimes, but when she is, it's actually more wounding. And I had to explain that to her. Yeah. So since my love language is affirmation. If you're giving me criticism, you got to know that you're killing me on this. And that's not all that. I mean, she has to sometimes be critical or negative toward it, but she has to be careful because that's not going to help us.
It's just more explosive. If you're a words person, that criticism stings a little bit more. It's more explosive when it hits.
I often say that communication is a learned trait, but actually marriage is kind of a learned trait. You can have a more intimate or more connected marriage, but you got to learn some of this stuff. And that's why it's good to, listen to the podcast. It's good to read books. It's good to do this kind of stuff because I tell parents, and I know you do too, parents and couples, read one marriage book a year, read one parenting book a year. And it's not like there's only one book. It's just, it's going to help you. And why do we not work on this? And work doesn't have to be like, drudgery, but, read a book together. Read it. Kathy read a book to me in the car while we were driving, and I listened to it for part of the time. I'm still thinking about from our previous conversation about just a spoonful of sugar. So I've lost some of our conversation.
I get it.
I'm trying to get that music going.
I can't get that lady out of my mind. Hey, if this triggered something to somebody who's listening, we unpack this in a whole chapter in the book on fears because it's a little bit heady in terms of because a lot of times when we argue, we're arguing over sex or finances or the children having sex for finances or whatever we're arguing over. That's at the surface level. We got to go underneath that surface because we always point to, we have the same arguments all the time about money. No, you're maybe having the arguments about money, but it's really what's underneath, what's lurking, what's keeping you from finding healing is you haven't identified your primary fear, and your response is chasing his or her fear.
You're right. So we have to learn how to, I bet you most of the people listening would be benefited by learning their primary fear.
Yep.
That was really helpful for me when I first started learning that stuff. Now, you mentioned the word sex, and of course, you always talk about sex. So,
how many books have you written on sex, by the way? Because I haven't written one book on sex.
You just talk about it all
there
the
you
time. When every marriage
You
conference.
put it into a print.
Yeah, like I speak on sex in marriage. You just bring it up on everything. So I give the talk, and then but yours is it's spice for everything. We're going to talk about finances today, and then you give us illustration on sex. But we digressed. We actually need a course correction. So let's talk about what you called have great sex. You said sex is a thermometer to a healthy relationship. What does that mean?
Well, I just think it's an indicator of intimacy. It's not the only indicator, but for I would say 90% of the people that are listening, there's a 10% that for whatever reasons cannot, function in that regard of physical sexual intimacy. But for most, it is an indicator. It's a sign that there's still some passion and interest and physical affection left in the marriage. Right. And so I would say that even if, you mentioned earlier that I'm speaking to 1,000 couples every month, and I have them write me letters. You and I haven't even talked about this, and we talk about everything, but I would say this last year I've been shocked at how many letters have come in from what I would call sexless marriages. Yeah. That the flame has disappeared.
Right.
So I think, and most of the time, it's not a physical issue. It's an emotional issue. Yeah. Something has happened between them, and they're allowing that to, be their new reality. Yeah. No, that is so good. I actually, in April, I did 2 marriage conferences. One at a place called Windshape, which is the Chick-fil-A Foundation World in Atlanta, and one at Mount Hermon. Kathy and I spoke, and in both places, people told me a story. One had not had a sexual intimate relationship for 12 years, and another one was 14 years at 2 different spots. And so I gave them some input, and I said, what do you think about that? And the woman said, well, that's exactly what Gary Chapman told us at 8 years. And I thought, well, you probably need to put this into practice. They're still together, so they want to be together. So and like what you say, it's not usually the plumbing issue or whatever. It's actually more of an emotional thing that they need to work through. And, the Bible says where there's no counsel, the people fall. In the multitude of counselors, there is safety. Sometimes hard to go talk to somebody about this, but it's important. Yeah, and we talked earlier about the drift. I mean, think about this. If you're in a marriage and you're drifting, you're just 1% off course. Yeah. So maybe other things are working in your life, but this physical sexual area is not, and you're 1% off course. Yeah. Over a long period of time, that 1% becomes miles. And so now all of a sudden you're like, oh, we haven't dealt with it that last year. Like, you just got to get some help on that. Yeah. You got to talk about it. Jim, you've even talked about, I've heard you speak about scheduled sex because it doesn't sound very, spontaneous and sexy, but, why don't you address that for him? Because I think that's a real practical tool.
What's interesting is it's coming out in all kinds of research now that people who are struggling at finding the time, if they schedule it, it actually helps them and they look forward to it. Their intimacy is better. And, I used to just kind of talk about it teasing, but the fact of the matter is now that I'm looking at more research, the more research I look at, the more people who actually say, hey, you know what, it's Friday night, it's Sunday, it's, whatever it is, they actually have developed a more excitement. And you know what it does is if you schedule it on a certain date, then it actually causes you to want more intimacy throughout the week. So it's kind of a good thing. We don't have much time, but I want to talk about one issue that we addressed. And it surprised me when we wrote this chapter and we looked at the research and it was on making babies when a baby arrives. Making babies when babies arrive, one of the greatest experiences and joys of our life, but at the same time for both men and women, marital satisfaction went down more for men than for women. Speak to that. What are practical ways we can do that? And again, we don't have much time, but I want you to speak to that. You have such good ideas on it.
Well, I think the reality is that I find that for men, you mentioned it goes down. It's because they're now the third person in the relationship, right? And so many people are caught off guard that way. I've got 3 grown married children, and I let all the guys know, like, you're going to feel like an outsider for about a year.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of difficulty with that, and it's very real to be in a marriage and not feel like you're wanted there. So one, you got to just address the reality. It's going to feel like that a little bit. She's not avoiding you. She's just exhausted and tired, and she's the only one that has the proper plumbing to make sure that baby stops crying. So, just reality going into it with children, you're going to be tired all the time. You're going to have some struggles and some troubles. But Jim, it goes back to what we talked about the first time. You have to make time for each other. Right. So I would just say, get babysitting, get help, get an in-law, get somebody to take that time where no matter what, you have to invest in that one-on-one time with one another.
And I think that's so good. Even when you're going back to the date night issue of, keep investing in your marriage, even when and I get you're going to be tired. So it's not going to be this amazing experience, but give each other time. You give others time during that time. So make sure the baby's taken care of, and then put some energy into that, even if it's not 100%, because you are exhausted in those first few years. Exactly.
I have 7 grandchildren under the age of 10, and I'm looking at these couples, my kids, and they're tired all the time.
Exactly.
They're tired all the time.
Yeah. No.
So they have to work on that. And they've got each other to help out with babysitting. They've got mom and dad. Now, not everybody has those luxuries.
Right.
But don't make excuses, make investments.
No, that is so good. I love that. Don't make excuses, make investments. Thank you.